the perimeter, there are no stars. Out here, we is stoned, immaculate.
Hello and welcome. This is the C86 show. I'm David Eastaugh. As you know, we love a special guest. This week it's going to be the turn of Juno Reactor, aka Ben Watkins, who I spoke to very recently to find out more about life, love, poetry and all that other groovy stuff. Has got decades of interesting musical moments in life, going back to the 70s in various indie pop bands or something like that, but also very recently, in fact, May 2026, there's a remix of the single Mona Lisa Overdrive, which is available from all good outlets and probably Bandcamp. Anyway, you're going to find out more about that and lots of other stuff. So after several minutes of interesting but casual chat, we get down to the exciting subject of the early formative years. Juno, over to you.
First gig I went to was David Bowie at Earl's Court.
God, you aimed quite high there, didn't you?
Insane. I think it was 1973. It might have been the 12th of May, 1973.
Blimey.
Yeah. And it was, it totally changed through going to that gig and like being so invested into his personality after that. And it just kept growing and growing. And I think, yeah, Bowie remained a massive influence.
Yes, all the way through, I guess.
All the way through, even post his death, you know, I listened to his music a lot.
Yes, it's
more than I should do.
Well, to be honest, you know, having sort of been obsessed with him with that first single and then the first album was Changes One, Bowie, and finding that kind of quite intriguing. And at the time, you know, there weren't anybody else that I knew listening to him during the early to mid 70s. I just was kind of curious what he did throughout the decades. But there were sort of times when I probably missed a couple of his albums, but I've gone back and listened to them. And I've been quite intrigued with the ones that obviously get panned a lot in the 80s, just as a sort of curiosity of
Which one?
It was Tonight and Never Let Me Down. And, you know, those two albums are just a curiosity within his kind of output, I suppose. But at the same time, not automatically going, oh, they're terrible, but just kind of curious and listening to them and trying to sort of find something of value from them, I suppose. That was, you know, and also realizing that I'm not an artist in that sense. It must be quite tricky thinking, my God, I've got to do an album. And, you know, they kind of want it in 12 months' time. And I've just been touring, I've been very busy, and then trying to sort of work out what to do to.
The artists as well can very much lose a sense of self and a sense, and then also work against it, you know, not wanting to necessarily do what they've always done. And so I think he went through a lot of trial periods, and I can understand that, really.
Yes. And I guess when he made some of those albums that have now been classically held as the great albums, you know, he probably didn't think this is going to be, you know, remembered as my best album. He probably thought, not sure that anyone's going to get the side two of Low is probably going to be a bit tricky, but everyone always says, oh, Low's my favorite album and all that. But yes, at the time he probably thought, not sure really. It could go either way. And it got panned by the NME. There's a famous bit with Charles Shaar Murray who really rips it apart, but obviously has to then sort of live by his words.
As well, wasn't it, really?
Pardon?
The Enemy were always a bit sort of brittle about people who had really massive success. And so...
Yes. So then after your experience with Mr. Bowie in sort of 73, when did you start sort of making music? When did sort of becoming a musician or an artist?
Got a record deal when I was like 20, 21 with CBS. And that was a really appalling band called the Hitmen.
Right.
It was not my favourite past journey. And through that, I got really started to awake myself into really what I like to do. And I started working with a guy. He had a project called New Asia. I was singing on that. And then I started up really looking around, and I really fell into electronic music with bands like DAF.
Yes.
And that sort of post-punk sort of electronic, Einstürzen Neubaden, these sort of bands I really like, Birthday Party, but quite edgy electronic or band type of things.
Yes. God,
And so Flowerpot Men, and then during the Flowerpot Men, I wrote a song for Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
Oh, yes.
Which was a track called Beach City, where they drive into Chicago in the red car. And that was my first sort of inkling that I could possibly do, I've got a good eye to picture. And then the Flowerpot Men sort of split up. Again, we were already broke, so we reformed and did this thing called Sunsonic, where Polydor gave us a load of money, and we made an appalling album. Really, it took us like 2 years to do, and we didn't know we got them to buy us a studio and, give us like enough money to buy cheap equipment to build this studio. But the trouble is we spent 2 years finding out how to record and all of this stuff. And so it was really a bit of a disaster. And when that all fell apart, I just thought, I'm just going to do what I like. And I started meeting people that had been traveling to India and coming back and saying, hey, they're playing your music in India. Like I did a project with youth from Killing Joke called The Empty Quarter. And they were playing like things like some of the Flowerpot Men stuff. They were playing some of the project I did with youth called The Empty Quarter.
Right.
And that sort of fed me, and I thought, okay. And then this DJ friend of mine was saying, look, we should listen to this, and this, and really sort of aim it at the parties. And I thought it was like in between doing sort of other jobs like recording or doing remixing, I was making these projects, which was essentially just the early part of Juno Reactor. So
yes, my God. So you go right back to that very late 70s, early 80s period of music with the Hitmen. So did you leave school at 16 and sort of become a musician straight away?
I left school at 16 and I went to Paris and I spent the summer there busking.
Right.
And when I sort of ended up the summer, I'd had enough of busking. And so I thought, okay, I'll start a little band.
And was that the Hitmen?
No, that was another band. I had like this band called, first I had Rainstorm, then I had IOU, and we were sort of very sort of rocky, more influenced by things like Little Feat and things like that. And then punk came along and that sort of changed everything. And I was like playing gigs like at the Brecknock with the Sex Pistols and bands like Japan.
Right.
In the same week, there'd be like, at the back of the Enemy or the Melody Maker or anything, there'd be like little adverts of like the Brecknock, and there'd be us, and there'd be Japan, Sex Pistols, yeah.
Blimey. But the first kind of band was the Hitmen, and then it was the Flowerpot Men.
Yeah.
Right. My God. So at that stage, were you the singer at this time?
Yeah.
So were you a singer at school? Were you in the choir or anything like that? Or what gave you?
I went to a cathedral school. I went to Chichester Cathedral. I got a scholarship when I was 9 to go and sing in the cathedral. And that pretty much paid for all my education till I was 13. And then I went to another music school after that, a place called Wells Cathedral.
My God, you were a sort of vocalist.
Vocalist, piano, violin.
My God, were you a teen protege?
Absolutely not. No, I think I'm frustrated. I think I was a good singer, and I think things like the piano and the violin, I really enjoyed playing violin, but it got on my nerves that I couldn't improvise. And then I started learning guitar, then classical guitar. And I found improvisation on the guitar much easier.
Right.
I stopped the violin when I was about 14, 15.
Yes.
And I picked up the viola in COVID because I sort of, maybe it felt like a job unfinished. And now I can improvise on the viola. I can do much more than I ever could back then.
Blimey, that's amazing. So when your first, just curious, because I'm obviously C86 and indie pop, but yes, the Hitmen then. So was that kind of a new romantic band that you sort of put together?
It was like a power pop band.
Right.
See, that the guy I knew from school was head of A&R at CBS. And I went up and saw him. And he said, look, there's some people I should really put you in touch with because they're looking for a singer. They're looking to get signed and blah, blah, blah. Are you into it? And I thought, why not? But it was very, I thought the band was the worst thing about it, but I think I was possibly the worst thing about it because I was really imitating.
Right.
Like my singing voice was very much of an imitator. I didn't really have my own sound or nothing like this. And that's why I stopped singing after like the Flowerpot Men.
Yes, but you had a good band. You had Pete on guitar, didn't you? You went on to work with Kirsty MacColl at this stage.
Yeah, I mean, Pete was really, really popular as a session guitarist. He worked with lots and lots and lots of people.
Yes, it was a bit of a young supergroup because Neil on bass has also worked on lots of other people's work as well. So was that with Columbia just said, look, here's lots of money, you're going to make it big?
They gave the management a lot of money, and then the management sort of like paid it out as they saw fit, which I think was mainly in their own pocket.
Yes.
And so we went to America. We did some dumb gigs in America. I'd say there's sometimes I had some good times there, but I felt like an outsider to this very cliquey group.
Yes. Did you write the lyrics as well at this stage? Were you a songwriter as well?
I didn't.
No, no.
Right.
Yes. And then with the Flowerpot Men, I know I'm quite excited by this. You did it. Were you on the Janice Long session as well that came out on Strange Fruit?
Yeah.
Blimey. So at that point, so during your 80s, I mean, you mentioned some of the German bands that were around in the birthday party as well. Were you quite caught up also in, I don't know, indie pop that was going, or sort of curious about producing or production or engineering at this stage?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, this Mortal Coil or whether the Cocteau Twins, when I was like I'd see the Cocteau Twins supporting other bands.
Right.
And say then we went on tour with Susie and the Banshees, Dead or Alive. I think our first gigs were with Dead or Alive,
God, is that Pete Burns, isn't it?
Burns, and then Susie and the Banshees. And I think there's someone else that we went on tour with that were, and that's where I met Budgie, and Budgie later joined Juno Reactor later years on.
Right. Yes. But then during that 80s period, I mean, music kind of changes a lot. And I sort of found that sort of the classic indie years, which I'm referring to, those jingly jangly sounds, a bit like, you know, you had the Smiths for that 5 year period, but then Ecstasy came along and that kind of changed the music quite a
Well,
lot.
I was in New York with recording a single, a version of Walk on Gilded Splinters that Dr. John wrote. And then we met Dr. John for breakfast, and he agreed to come down and do like a rap on his own track. And like it seemed like a great idea, but actually it was awful because he was so amazing. He was so amazing that he blew everything that we did completely out of the water. And it sort of said, look, this is how you do it, guys. But he
Yes.
was super cool. We recorded it in Run DMC's studio in Nostrand, Brooklyn. He was super cool. He sounded absolutely amazing. And if you ever listen to that single, Walk on Gilded Splinters, the 12-inch version, just go to his section because he sounds amazing on it.
Well, I'm going to do that. Walk on Gilded. Yes, Dr. John, my God. And did you get kind of excited? Because I know John Peel, who was my go-to DJ at that time, he started playing an awful lot of, I suppose, the Chicago house sound, and then a guy called Gerald and 808 State. And I loved people like Adamski, as well as various other people. Did dance music become much more your thing rather than anything else?
When I was in New York, someone offered me a tab of ecstasy. This was 85. And suddenly things started to morph around that thing. In fact, no one that I knew at that time was really taking ecstasy. And I don't even think it was like illegal particularly. And so that started to influence tracks that we were writing. Like I wrote a track called Melting Down on Motor Angel, which is just like the MDMA sort of abbreviation.
Yes.
And then, like where I moved to in South London, I was with like Jimmy from the KLF, Alex Patterson from the Orb, Youth from Killing Joke. In fact, I knew Youth before I knew the other guys. And so I was living around the corner from the KLF, and then we would go off to parties together, the early raves, and I'd watch them sort of create their What Time Is Love off the tracks they'd heard the night before.
Yes.
For one of the sunrise raves. And it was that was in the period that I was finishing the project with Polydor. I still had a studio. I started to learn how to use it. And then I started, rather than going into this sort of commercial, sort of electronic area, I wanted to write more psychedelic-based music for people on drugs, on like acid, really. And that was the sort of the doctrine, I suppose, for the first two albums, was like really making it for the parties where we were already popular.
Yes.
Get invited out to America or Japan to go and play at these parties that had come from India. And then, that time it wasn't like a cliche or anything. It was just the network of people that were into music at that time would then try and put on their own parties in their own countries and then invite us. So we were completely below the radar. And that's where we sort of stayed pretty much.
Well, absolutely. Because you did a collaboration, didn't you? Is it Apollo 11? You did a 12-inch piece on...
What is it called?
Peace in the Middle East?
Like Peace in the Middle East, yeah.
Right. So that was...
Nothing's changed there then, eh?
Yes, it went down well. And
no one listened to it.
No, this is unfortunately true. So with Sunsonic, that was with Adam Peters, wasn't it? And you were on Polydor again with Melting Down on Motor Angel. So you did one album with him.
Yeah, that was the one that I was saying was absolute murder in the studio. He was always trying to... It sort of became like we just didn't get on. I think mainly through doing all of this work in the studio, we really realized how much we really couldn't work with each other.
This does happen, doesn't it, really? This is a bit like if you ever go on holiday with someone you're not getting on with, it's not good.
But that's why when I started Juno Reactor, I thought, okay, I'm not going to get myself in that same position where you end up in a band where you hate everyone, or you're in a marriage with anyone. And so really it became a project about collaboration with anyone. And anyone could come into Juno Reactor, and if we got on well, they'd stay, and if they didn't, just like cheerio, And that's the way it stayed.
It's the only way to go, really, isn't it? I think David Bowie sort of worked that out quite quickly. You just do the project with a group of people, and then you just move on.
Yeah.
So with that, I was going to say, with the 90s period then, was this kind of, you completely changed your focus on the musical landscape and was going to stick with dance music for the rest of your life?
I don't know about that, but it was already, it was big, it was going well, and I loved doing it, and I loved going to the parties and events and see people dancing to the Juno Reactor stuff. And I was working with a guy called Tony Thorpe, who again was like the rhythm man from the KLF. I was doing lots of things like jungle, drum and bass, and things like that with him. So everything seemed very dance orientated. And I think what's different was that maybe the Juno sound has a more sort of cinematic element to it.
Yes, well, absolutely.
Also, then meeting, by the end of the second album, I'd really got, I suppose, a little bit bored of all the little squiddly noises. I went to South Africa and I produced a Zulu band called Skeleton. And that's where I met Aman Pondo. And they're like, they're a traditional Pondo musicians, like marimbas, drums, vocals, everything. And I was offered the Moby tour across America.
Blimey.
And my band didn't want to go. So, like, I'd met these guys, and I'd met this other percussionist called Mabi. They're both from Langer. They're all from Langer, apart from Mabi's from Joburg. And I rang them up and said, hey, do you fancy going on tour with Moby across America? And they came over for 2 days, did 2 days rehearsals, then bang, straight out on the road.
God, that was a kind of life-changing experience.
Massive. I think that's possibly one of the biggest life-changing experiences I've had, because it was like being in a bus, going across America with these people that you knew, but you didn't really know them. And they were so much fun. Everything was a joy. It was a dance. I learned so much from them by doing that, by having that experience.
Yes. Well, actually, it's interesting because I sort of in the 90s was quite into the hippie new age world, and everybody was really into djembe drumming at that stage. There was a lot of people sitting in teepees, smoking and drumming for hours. And yes, they just got into rhythms, but also it became very about earth magic as well, and ley lines and stone circles. I mean, cultural appropriation was it was very rife.
Also, the interesting thing is they were really into, or not really into, part of their life was the Sangoma religion, which lives as like a parallel religion with Christianity. And so you'd see them sort of talking away with something, and I'd suddenly start learning a lot about their cultural life as well.
Yes. My God, that must have just been such a relief to have a change of scenery and sort of consciousness after your, 80s period.
And also that they were really down to earth people, but we had such a laugh across America. It was just laughter all the way across America, I've never experienced that in that same way.
No, absolutely. I mean, most people who tour America, it's often the thing that breaks the most bands up, I've found, having done so many interviews. It's often the American trip that sort of finishes them. Was it the first time the African musicians had also been touring America as well in that context?
Well, when he was 18, was like he died not so long ago, but he was about 15 years older than me. And he toured with like Duke Ellington. He was playing with Miles Davis on live shows. He was an incredible percussionist. And, I think my idea of percussion before I met Mabi, sadly, from my own pathetic knowledge, was people like Mickey Finn from T-Rex, who just stood there and looked pretty and sort of behaved like a seal, like a slappy, and yeah, that's percussion. But, when you get into it from the South African perspective, it's so much more. And so I wrote tracks like Conga Fury. Like, in fact, the night I met Mabi, we were talking about how we wrote music. And the way he wrote music was exactly the same way as I write music. I write it very from a visual perspective or from a story and blah, blah, blah. And so I said, oh, we've got to, as soon as you get back to England, we've got to get into the studio, because he was on the same label as myself.
Right.
Which was Blue Room. I was on Blue Room, he was on Melt 2000, which was like sister label. And I got exposed to some amazing musicians because of the jazz label, like Ayeta Morera and Neto, and who was playing with Ayeto, the Amapondo group, who had the most amazing dynamic frontman in this guy called Dizu. And you can see it on the DVD. I think the first one we did from Japan, because we did the Moby tour, then we went straight to Japan and we played this place called the Akasaka Blitz. And it was all filmed. And you can see the sort of interaction of the African side and the sort of British electronic, European electronic, how it sort of merged. And it was very freeform.
Mm.
It was very freeform. And that's what I loved about it. I mean, I could stop the computers, or in fact, I didn't have computers then, I had tapes. And I had a mixing desk and I could cut things out, open it up for the percussion, stop the tapes and then restart them. And so it became like an improvisation. The idea was that it was meant to be more improvised.
And did that feel much more of a enjoyable creative journey being in that context?
It was stunning. Yeah.
Yes, it's interesting. And then you did Moby in America and also Glastonbury as well. Can you remember much about that? Because I was still going to Glastonbury at that stage and up till David Bowie in 2000. Was that a good Glastonbury, or was it a muddy year?
Lots of mud.
Ah.
Mud, and I think it was more on the jazz stage. And in fact, on that, because I was working with about 5 guys from Amapondo, and on that show, all of them were there because Amapondo were playing as well. And so there was about 16 of us, which possibly didn't make sense. You know, a bit of
Yes.
load.
Yeah. So after that project, did you then sort of team up with the Creatures and Susie for
No,
another?
time, Budgie loved the Beyond the Infinite and the Bible of Dreams album, of which Amapondo were beginning to be on Bible of Dreams. And they asked me to do a remix of a track. And the track I really want, that's it, the remix of a Susie and the Banshees track. Then they came back to me and said, would I produce one of their tracks for the Creatures album? So I did something like something Angel. It was okay. But the track I really wanted to produce was I'm Here on Another Planet. And so I got wind that the director for a major Hollywood film, Lost in Space, was looking for a track. And so I rang him up and said, look, I think I've got the track for you. And I told Susie and Budgie, and they gave me the bits, and I sort of recreated. And then they came in and sang, played drums, and we put a track in Lost in Space, which was I'm Here from Another Planet.
Blimey, was that a sort of a doorway opening to another career at this stage?
No.
Fair enough. But I was going to say, but with soundtracks, was that the beginning of your world with film?
No, I think things like Ferris Bueller got me the interest because of that.
Ferris Bueller. Actually, that was one of the ones. I didn't really love the Brat Pack films, and I don't know if I watched that one. Is it worth checking out?
It's supposed to be the best one.
Typical.
It's the best one out of that whole lot of John Hughes films. Maybe Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, but I'd say it's a pretty good one. And that sort of made me think, because at that time people weren't really lusting after film syncs. In fact, they were more like turning them down. So I think I then got a film, at TVT Records, there was a great woman there called Patricia Josephs, and I'd just produced Tracy Lords
Oh yes, Tracy Lords. She
Yeah,
was. Did she? Who did she work with? Tracy Lords. I can't. Um.
famous director who did like that, all of that.
God, that's a
She did
good.
Cry Baby. The film
Pardon?
she did the film with Johnny Depp called Cry Baby.
Oh, of course. Yes, John Waters.
So she's a great friend of John Waters.
Of course, it would be, wouldn't it? Really.
And so I produced her album. Well, I did 4 tracks. I wrote 4 tracks for her, and 2 of them did really, really well, like things like Control. But then the instrumental of Control was more popular than the actual vocal version. And then things like the Red Hot Chili Peppers wanted to do a remix of Fallen Angel, and then I had to mix their version as well as writing it. And that got in, the original version of that got in another film with Denzel Washington, and can't remember what that one's called.
So was that last? So she did Control, then Fallen Angel,
Yeah,
and the studio album is called 1000 Fires.
yeah.
And you're one of the executive producers on that, aren't you?
I don't have executive. I'm a producer. I did 4 tracks.
Yes, I'm trying to work out which. Oh, you did Good and Evil
Good and
and
Evil, Control,
Outlaw Lover.
Lover. Yeah, I quite like that song, but it didn't really do much. But and
She had
then
a she had a hell of a band with her at that stage.
yeah, and she was great to work with. She was great. She was very I'm not businesslike. No, she really pushed and pushed and pushed to get herself to be better for the recordings and stuff. And those tracks were very popular. I think it got to number 2 on Billboard, Control,
Yes.
and it got in some films, I think. I can't remember. I just got someone synced it the other day for a film.
God, that must be quite nice. Did you just, and I just, in that excitement of working with Tracy Lords, did you mention the Red Hot Chili Peppers? You did a remix or?
Well, the Red Hot Chili Peppers loved the track Fallen Angel, and they went into the studio and they did a new version of it, but they didn't have time to finish it, so they sent it back to me. And then I put her vocals on it, and then I mixed it for them. So it was really nice getting actually getting a chance to mix the Chili Peppers.
Yes, my God, absolutely. That must mean they were very funky at that stage of life, actually. So
Amazing.
that was taking us up to the sort of the through the John Major and New Labour years, really, wasn't it? That period. God, it was very prolific at this point. Were you sort of dashing over from the UK to Hollywood or New York quite a lot at this point?
Not at all. It wasn't until it was weird. I was getting my hair cut, and my mate was getting his hair cut, and we were sitting next to each other in this barber sort of shop. And he said, "Oh, I heard your music's going into the new Matrix." And this was like 2001, and I said, "Well, I haven't heard anything." I spoke to my manager. He said he hasn't heard nothing either. But then around the end of 2022, they rang my manager and said, would I come out for a meeting with the Wachowski brothers and just have a chat. And so I met them like November 22. And I mean, for me, it was like it's it's the ultimate experience going to meet like these guys, and we just already got on. And everything, like whether it was like the poster in their office was like of A Chinese Ghost Story, which was one of my favorite films. Then they spoke about the Truffaut Hitchcock book, which I loved. I'd sort of go through the Hitchcock book, and like I had fantasies that I could one day make some films, but so I'd go through this book and like underline stuff and watch the film after I'd done that chapter. And they mentioned it and I knew it. So, and then they showed me the scene, and which was the first one they wanted me to do, was the freeway chase.
Right.
And they just said, look, Ben, we love what you do. Find yourself a studio in LA and come back in January. So I went to a company called SRC or something, and they said, look, the only place that's got your desk in LA is this mansion, this castle in Silver Lake. And I said, yeah, that sounds like the one to me. And it was from there that like we got into this place called the Paramore, which was built for this, like the first original Latin romantic lover before Valentino. And it was this amazing ex-nunnery Hollywood star, like people like Errol Flynn, David Niven, all these guys would like hang out there in the 30s. It was amazing. It was like, it's like dropping into a Hollywood film. Your life suddenly dropped into a Hollywood film. And although there's a lot of work and pressure and people trying to kick you off the job, the Wachowskis kept on giving me more work and saying, you know, we love what you do. Can you have a bash at this one? And there was one that he'd given to the Prodigy that he didn't like what they did. So have a look at this one, but sort of really fuck around with the orchestra on it. And that was the Burly Brawl.
Right.
And so on that first one, you know, I spent maybe 3 months in LA. With every other day, I'd meet up. Every 2 or every 3 days, I'd meet up with the directors and play them stuff. And then when it came time for Revolutions, they just chopped it down to me and Don Davis, who's the main orchestra guy, and did the same thing.
Oh, that was the big break, actually, wasn't it, in life? That must have just been. It's interesting, isn't it? I know that I don't know, very different artist, Nick Lowe. He was just plodding along, but then he had a track called "Peace, Love, and Understanding" that got used in a film, which was like the biggest selling soundtrack of its time, and just went, oh, I've now got my pension plan, and that's kind of it, really, for me. And that was the cover that Elvis Costello had done. So I don't think he said he went to see the film, but didn't even hear the track in the film. But it was on the soundtrack, and it sold millions. So was that the second Matrix film that you worked on, or the first?
On Reloaded and Revolutions, which were 2 and 3.
Right, these are the ones that, these are particularly stylized. So when you worked on them, did you have the scene there that you could see, and then they said, do your best shot?
Pretty much. I mean, they gave me a music editor, a guy called Zig Gron, who was brilliant. I said to Zig, I know fuck all how to do this, but like, if you can help me as much as you can, that would be great. And I'd already played them the basic idea of Mona Lisa Overdrive. And with Zig's help, he really educated me, almost like a university course, about what to hit. You know, and then I'm talking to Don, who's doing orchestration for it on the ideas that I presented to him. And so I learned a massive amount whether it's like the conductor track, which we would both share. Don would give me his conductor track, I'd give him my conductor track, how we would, you know, make sure we landed on certain things, hits, was, you know, a very intense period of working. But I loved it. I might have slept maybe 4 hours a night.
Well, yes, I would imagine it was the pressure must have been amazing. And then when you got to see the film and heard the music, that must have blown your mind, seeing that, because it was the most stylized film, and there was a lot of, and again, I mentioned about my friends with their djembe drummers, but I was because there was a lot of people in drumming groups at this stage, and I remember thinking, God, they're going to love if they came to see The Matrix, they would love it, because it's all about that kind of hard tribal percussion.
But funny, because I had like Mabi, the guy from Joburg, I'd ring him up and say, hey, Mabi, do you want to come out and do some sessions in LA? And he's like, oh no, I wanna hang out with my chickens. I've got a load of chickens on the way. And he loved chicken, you know. It was like, So Reloaded, he didn't come out to LA. And then when they asked me back to come in on Revolutions, I said, Mabi, you can't miss this. This is something totally, you just can't miss it. So he came out, and yeah.
That must have been quite a different experience then, doing, Revolutions after Reloaded.
In what way?
Well, having your, Moby with you at that stage, working with you in the studio.
I had a really good team of people. Some of them were mentally a bit retarded, but that always helps.
Yes, well, I would imagine, actually. Had they just taken too many drugs, or were they just...
One of them one of them definitely had my engineer, who's like a real pain in the ass. But I brought in people like Deepak Ram,
Right,
on flute, and then I was looking for an Indian singer, and he suggested Lakshmi Shankar, who sang with George Harrison and the Beatles and stuff, because she lived down the road in Studio City. And she came in, and like literally she came in and we did one take. And I just knew I had everything I needed. And it was just a thank you, that's amazing.
God, did you feel like you were in some sort of altered reality with all this kind of pressure and all these people? And
by the time that you're sort of settled in. It's only afterwards that you realize at the time I knew this was something different. This was something that will remain precious to me for a long time, because the Wachowskis were incredibly good to me. There was one guy who was the head of Warner Brothers, or the sync guy, or the A&R guy, and he was always trying to get me kicked off the project, because I was taking up Warner Brothers artists' potential slots. And so one day I got to the studio, and the studio owner said, look, we can't let you in because you've been kicked out. They're not paying. So I rang up Joel Silver, who's the producer of The Matrix, and he just went fucking ballistic on this guy. He sort of ripped him a second arsehole in front of about 10 other people. And so it's strange, in those situations, you do find that there are people who'll try and get you kicked off the job with a smile and a backword and all of this stuff. But, so
Christ,
you have to put on a metal sort of helmet and just sort of go through the barrage sometimes on a job like that. But I survived it enough.
Christ, that is a hell of a project, though, isn't it? To deal with dealing with that kind of hostility, or sort of karma, or not karma, energy, I suppose. It's hard to navigate. I mean, it isn't the easiest time when
a lot of political behind the scenes elements, whether it's, you could be, I can't really say this conversation, but there's some people who just really do not want you to do it. And it's really, for my luck, it was the Wachowskis really wanted me to do it. So if people were fired for some things,
Yes, God, we were really obsessed with The Matrix. It's strange going back to it and thinking, God, it's only 23 years ago that all happened. That's a bit weird, actually.
It's supposed to be the best, I'd say it's supposed to be the best thing that I've ever been involved in musically on that sort of massive grand scale. And then when I landed back on Earth afterwards, it was really hard to write anything.
Yes.
Because I just finished Navras, and that was possibly the biggest tune I'd ever written, or written with a lot of other people, really, in a way. Although me and Don are credited as the only writers, every session musician, whether it was Mabi, Deepak, Lakshmi Shankar, Greg Ellis, they all really put like 200% into it. And so,
yes,
that was an experience.
That was, yes, coming back to Planet Reality must have been quite something, wasn't it, really? So on that front then, you've had a remix, haven't you, of Mona Lisa Overdrive? So when did this project sort of come about? When did they decide this is a good idea?
Well, it wasn't really up to them, because I've got I'm allowed to remix those tracks. And so it was more a decision. I got Navras done maybe a few years ago. And then one of the remixers of Navras was saying, I'd love to have a go at Mona Lisa Overdrive, Reaky Reakson. And I gave him all the parts, and he came back with it. And the first sort of like versions of it were okay, nothing worth really releasing. But he kept on pushing and pushing and pushing it, this track, for about a year. And then he gave it to me last summer, and I played it at some festivals, and it was like, wow. So I thought we'd to put it out, you know.
God. Is this on Metropolitan or Metropolis Records?
Metropolis, yeah.
Oh yes, there you go. So then, after that project in the O period, what's your next period after that? What do you then sort of work on?
I did finish an album called Labyrinth.
Yes.
And that took me a while because I think I was still getting like sort of flashbacks of what I would love to. I really wanted to do film music. You know, I'd really fallen in love with the idea of it, and I was given a film, like a film in Japan, a full feature animation, and they said they got me over to Japan. I had a chat with them, and I said, "Why do you want me to write an orchestral soundtrack?" Which was like they wanted 95% orchestra, and I said, "I'm known as an electronic artist." And they just said something strange. They said, "We want to hear what you sound like with an orchestra." And so I did that, and I loved that. I fell in love with just writing for orchestral instruments, you know, because once you've got the palette there, it's almost simpler than doing. For me, it was simpler than doing electronic music, because with electronic music, you're getting your bass drum, you're getting your bass, you're making the bass sound, you're doing your lines, you're doing the atmospheres, you've got a story, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But an orchestra, you've got your palette. It's not going to change much. You know, you can add things to it or whatever, but, you know, so you start writing in a very organized fashion. So that was brilliant, and I fell in love with writing for that format. But I didn't get offered any more jobs.
What was it like working with an orchestra, though? Is that the first time you had a symphony that you kind of had to conduct?
It was like with the Matrix. I wrote a number of sections that, like, I would listen to William Walton or I'd listen to Bartok, and I'd say, these type of strings, Don, we want something like this, you know, or Honegger, or people like that, and I'd like get the samples of like Bartok, and I'd put it in the track, and I'd say something like this, and he'd go, okay, and well, he wouldn't actually say, oh, we've got to change that, and so this was the first time, like, my dad's was like a really massive classical lover. He wasn't a player or nothing. He just loved listening to classical music. So, like, I'd go off to him and say, oh, I'm looking for something a bit like this, a bit like that. They go, oh, this might be good. And so we go off and listen, and I'd have like blueprints almost created. So you can hear, like, I'd say, like, in that school, there's bits of Benjamin Britten. There's a bit of everything. There's a bit like a sort of a crow. And obviously I'd change it, but, you know, those were the influences that I liked, that I thought worked with the film.
Yes, absolutely. And did that come out? Because has that come out as an album? Because this was called the story is Brave Story, isn't it?
Yeah.
Did this particular work get released?
Yeah, it got released in Japan. I don't think it's ever had like a Spotify release or anything like that. And I think that's probably the only thing my dad was ever really that proud of me for doing, was doing some orchestral music, you know.
He thought, this is it.
They thought, oh,
we've turned a corner. It's going to be all right.
Is what he always wanted him to do. So then And then I got back into doing maybe other types of, just looking around at different types of musics, and then coming back to more of the Juno sounds. And then with performance, like I was touring with Amon Pondo, then that had to change. I got in Budgie, then I formed this sort of show called the Mutant Theatre with like these Russian, two different groups of Russian performers. And we did this sort of stage show called the Mutant Theatre, which was like I suppose, Barbarella meets Labyrinth.
Fantastic. A bit
I
Cirque du Soleil or the
would
Mutoid Waste Company.
think of it as like a Las Vegas, like a psychedelic, glamour Las Vegas show. And I
God.
was being performed in Las Vegas. And then this DEFCON, which have their convention in Caesar's Palace, rung up and said, would we go out there and do their main spot at the convention in 2018? And I said, yeah. And that's what we did. We took the Mutant Theatre, Juno Reactor and the Mutant Theatre to Las Vegas. But it's hard trying to sell a show with like 16 band members. And then crazy things like the promoter in Australia that wanted it, he was killed by the police. And then my agent hung himself. And then
Christ, this was a bit of a dark time, wasn't it?
one of the Mutant Theatre guys got run over by a tank as he was a stuntman on a film in Russia. The tank was meant to go backwards, it went forwards, then it went forwards again, completely crushing Oleg. And after that, I thought, apart from the fact then we had the Ukraine war kicked off and COVID, I thought I've got to change it again. So we're now into like a new.
Yes, well, quite. Did you record, by the way, just that DEFCON that was at Caesar's Palace in Vegas? Did that get recorded?
I don't. Well, you're not really allowed to record stuff because people don't like the hackers and stuff at DEFCON don't like to be shown on film.
Right, little dears.
Yeah. So we filmed us going around LA. I'm in Las Vegas.
Did you enjoy the production, the show that you did manage to do at for that evening?
Like smoke and mirrors. It sounds better than it really was.
Right.
It sounds like, it's had that grandeur of like Juno Reactor and the Mutant Theatre go out to Las Vegas, and we played in Caesar's Palace and we played in this ballroom. But I think it's, I might have enjoyed more doing like 1,000 people down the road in a normal venue.
Yes. Or I suppose Burning Man would have probably been a bit more.
Burning great. But I would have loved to have toured the Mutant Theatre around America because at that time they would never have seen anything like it.
Yes. So then, yeah. So this decade, which is obviously a bit odd. So what have you just been working on, and what's your current plans?
Well, I've been writing an album for too long, and like I feel that with electronic music, it's very homogenized into different little pigeonholes, and everyone wants to be stuck in a pigeonhole. And I sort of started writing this sort of a load of ideas based around about when I grew up loving things like Kojak. And
we love Telly Savalas.
Yeah, Batman, Kojak, anything American was like spoon-fed to me, and I was totally willing, whether it was like the bands that came out of LA, Alice Cooper, whatever, that whole sort of funky look, Black Consciousness, everything. It was like, it felt like that's where heaven was.
Yes.
So this album that I've been writing is based on sort of like my childhood memories, but rose tinted, but then the reality of what I've found and what is. So
Yeah, my God.
so I
The rock.
invited a bluegrass band. Like I've been following a bluegrass band around on Instagram, and I love their playing because I was saying I was getting back into viola and stuff. But I just love this guy's fiddle playing. And they came about a year and a half after that. They came to play in Brighton, in like a little pub. And I said, "Hey guys, do you fancy doing a track in my studio?" And they came down, played them a session. And it took me a while to put together, but it's this track called "Bury Me Deep in the Ground," and it's very different. It's bluegrass meets electronic.
What's the bluegrass band called?
The Lonesome Ace String Band.
I'll have to check them out. Yes, because I say we in that royal world, but in the 70s, there was a song that came out, wasn't there? Devil Went Down to Georgia, about a fiddle player. So perhaps that was in your sort of subconsciousness, that you, having sort of thought about the Rockford Files, Telly Savalas, Evil Knievel, you were embedded there, because it was a song that was kind of there in, I don't know, the 70s, and was on top of the pops, and we were quite blown by it, because probably...
I wrote a track called "Man Down" in COVID that was, as a reaction to the George Floyd killing. And that I couldn't really do it, so I sort of did it in a way that was like Jesse James. It's a bit like, it's like fiddles and acoustic guitars and electronics. And it saved my ass in COVID because I was able to sell it as a trailer to a games thing, and they paid stupid money for it, and that sort of helped me survive COVID. And then after that, I was thinking what would go with it, and I think that's when that sort of "Bury Me Deep in the Ground" came out, and it's about someone who's lived a really pretty bad life, who just wants to get bread where they can't find him for living in the devil's hand. There's so many people you can put that to nowadays.
Yes.
But and then I've been doing other tracks that are basically sort of little scenarios about America. Yeah.
Yes. Are you sort of hoping to bring this out sometime in the year, or is this...
I really hope so. Yeah.
Do you work quite quickly once you get the ideas formulated?
I'm possibly the slowest person in the world. Sometimes it can happen like this, boom, 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 and I've done it in a few days, but that's so rare these days because you keep referring back, or there's a new bit, or there's a different production thing, and you double think yourself sometimes way too much.
Yes, I could imagine, actually. And then you pick up your acoustic guitar or your
I've bought an acoustic guitar, and this crazy thing about it is that I went into a shop. I didn't think I was wanting to buy an acoustic guitar, and it's a Hagstrom, which is the same model that Barry. It's a 1966 Hagstrom.
Oh, right.
And it had shitty old strings on it, and I played it, and I said, what you do it for? So I swapped in my bass for a Fender bass, gave him 300 quid. And as soon as I got it, I put it on a remix I was working on the Pete Murphy and Boy George remix.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's this one.
Well, I can see.
It's ready.
And what was the first song you decided to strum?
We can hear immediately.
Actually, it's not coming out of anything.
Huh?
I said I can't hear anything from it. How come?
Maybe you got his background
Oh.
Background thing on it. Shit.
Yes, it might be. Unless you hold your mic near it. I don't know if that would make any difference.
I think it's got a background check on it.
Right. God. Oh, is it a 12-string guitar?
Yeah, I've taken that off. See if you can hear it now.
Okay. God, no, I can't hear a thing. It's so strange. Your sort of setup has sort of prevented me hearing your strumming.
Microphone modes. Test speak. Yeah, I can't turn it off for some reason.
Right.
Sounds. If you take this audio, you'll hear it.
Right. Oh, okay. I've got it. Yeah. Okay. So are you enjoying discovering the delights of your 12-string guitar?
I love it. I love it. It's like you pick it up and it makes you want to, it's like got a ghost in it. It makes you want to write a song, which I'm not a songwriter. And I'm definitely not a good songwriter, but I write songs on it. Yeah.
Well, God, that's fantastic. You could have an acoustic album out alongside it. So it will be interesting to hear will that be featuring on the album?
Yeah.
Brilliant. We love it. That's really...
And now I've got this viola, which I got from some of the money from the Man Down thing, it was made in Brighton in 1961.
Crikey.
Yeah, and it's beautiful. It sounds amazing. And then I got this one as an electric, and I've been putting this through some really quite amazing. I've been testing this out for about a year, and there's some of this because I do this project called Electronic Penderecki,
Right.
which is like which I a festival said to me, "Have you got any other ideas?" After we did Mona Lisa Overdrive live in Tenerife, like you can go on YouTube and see us doing it live with a full orchestra. Then the next year it went down so well, they said, "Look, can you come up with another idea?" So I said, "Well, Electronic Penderecki." And they came back to me and said, "Yeah, we got the budget for it." So we went and did like about half an hour of rearranged Penderecki for like 9 people as opposed to a big orchestra. And I wrote, apart from doing arrangement stuff and sounds and recreation, I made some effects that I thought Penderecki would really like, where you take like the original sound, then a second later it goes down a semitone, up a semitone, then another second later it goes down 6 semitones, and it creates this sort of like, and then it starts looping within itself.
Right.
So that really got me into this idea of sort of landscapes that can be produced really on like a simple instrument that can then really work itself into new types of electronic music.
And is that going to be released?
Well, we've done one performance, which we've got about half an hour of music. We're meant to be doing 3 more shows in this October, and I've got to come up with another half hour of music. And it's like someone taking your brain out and giving it a wash, and you can think again, you know.
Yes.
But the actual rules that are so, there are rules, and there are, you know, within the Penderecki world. But with the next 30 minutes, we're really going to push those boundaries. And a really great arranger that I work with called Jan, who's Polish and a composer, and very versed in Penderecki.
I mean, it does sound very technically challenging.
Not really.
Fair enough.
Inside effects for, you know, so long now, it's like they're my tentacles.
Right.
When I give, like, say, like the violist in the Penderecki orchestra, and I say to it, you know, this solo that you do is you and the effect. It's not just you, it's you and the effect. So when you play this piece, you're playing with the effect. And she got it. She totally got it. And she said that, Penderecki would have loved this.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Penderecki. I'm gonna have to go and do some more research on Penderecki, aren't I, really? I'm floundering on this bit.
Well, you've seen all of his stuff, like The Exorcist, Shutter Island, what's The Shining.
Right.
Those directors used his music, although he never wrote for those films, they used his music. And it's quite amazing. A lot of people don't really quite get it, or they, don't want to relax into it. But things like the Natura stuff, if you just have it on, if you're not really trying to listen to it, but you just like lie on your sofa and sort of like in that stage between sleep and awake, you let it come to you like that.
Right.
It's incredibly visual.
Yes. Well, I'm going to have to then sort of go and do an awful lot of research on Penderecki, aren't I?
And it's like the avant-garde Mozart.
You're right. There you go. Yes. So he's done, I'm just looking him up at the moment, actually. So, yes, Symphony No. 1. Yes. Okay. So he passed away 5-6 years ago, didn't he? Have I got the right person? God, I'll have to check this out. But yeah, so he did the music for The Shining.
Yeah.
Got you. Right. Okay. Well, look, Ben, this has been good. And the just going back to your release, this is coming out on all good platforms and downloads. And will it come out as a vinyl record as well?
I doubt it.
Fair enough.
Like, you throw out stuff into the sort of the sea of music these days, don't you? So it's like it's very hard to get eyes on. I think the reaction to the remix has been great. People love it, or the people that have heard it seem to really love it. And but everything's very cliquey these days. DJs write their own music, they play their own music. It's not like back in the day where a great track would come out and everyone would be playing it.
Yes, I know. It's got you must have seen so many changes from your early years. It must be quite sort of keeping the faith. Anyway, but this is definitely Mona Lisa Overdrive is definitely out, and hopefully a new album from yourself.
Hopefully, yeah.
And that, dear listener, is the end of the interview with Juno Reactor. This has been the C86 show, David Eastaugh. So if you want to contact me, you can on any of the social media platform sites. Just do C86 show. All these interviews have been archived on Spotify, iTunes, Podbean. It's true. Have a great week. Stay safe.